I want to start by sharing something I heard. This is probably a couple months ago now. I wrote it down because it was one of those things that I was like, man, I know this is important. I'm gonna pull it out here eventually. But when I heard it, it was both inspiring and it bothered me a little bit. Do you ever have anything like that where you hear it and you're like, oh man, I want that, but then you have that thought that immediately follows it up, which is like, but I know how far away I am from it. You know, there's like that crazy distance. So you're inspired, but then immediately a little bit depressed. You ever have that? Hopefully the sermon doesn't do that to you. It's not the goal this morning. So the story actually comes out of Formula One racing, which is weird because I've never watched Formula One racing in my life, unless you count Iron Man 2, where Tony takes over and his car gets cut in half and he becomes Iron Man, like right on the track. That's the only time I've ever watched Formula One racing. So it's weird that the story comes out of that. In the 80s and 90s, the best Formula One racer was a Brazilian named Ayrton Senna. And he was phenomenal. 45 wins, 65 pole positions. He raced what they say is the perfect lap. He went from 5th to 1st on a rain-soaked track in Donington Park. Don't know why I know that now, but I do. As I was reading about him, it's one of those random facts. And if you're sitting there going, I don't know what any of that means, me neither. But from what I understand, Ayrton Senna was like the Michael Jordan, the Babe Ruth, the Tom Brady of Formula One racing. He was absolutely at the top. And in the late 80s, he developed a rivalry with a German driver named Prost. And they went at it for like 6 years, just on the track, off the track, just constant going back and forth. And they were both like 1-2, 1-2. They were really, really good. Now, this is the part in the story that I was inspired and bothered by. At one point, they were interviewing Prost, and they were talking about Senna. And, you know, as any good rivalry, they're taking jabs at each other. And Prost suggests that Senna shouldn't be allowed to race anymore. Now, that's not super abnormal in a rivalry, right? Rivals always say ridiculous things about each other. So he's like, he shouldn't be allowed to race anymore. But his reason was unique. He argued that Senna's faith caused him to not be afraid of death, which caused him to be dangerous, so he shouldn't be allowed on the track. Isn't that cool? So it's like, hey, this guy so believes in God. He has such a deep faith that the person who disliked him most in the world noticed and basically argued that his faith was an unfair advantage to him. It made him too bold, too brave, too fearless, take more risks than any other driver. And it was all because of his faith. Now, I know, you probably recognize, Prost actually meant that as an insult. You know, it's like your stupid faith makes you stupid on the track and it's gonna hurt somebody. Like, he meant it as an insult. But if you're a person of faith, you should know that's probably one of the highest compliments that someone can give you. That your faith gives you like this unfair advantage. Can you imagine? I don't know who is on your list of people that don't like you, but like whoever's at the top of that list, the person who dislikes you most in the world, can you imagine them trying to like have you be disqualified from some aspect of life? Not because they're being like, you know, some persecution thing, but because they actually viewed your faith as an unfair advantage. That'd be crazy, right? That your faith makes you dangerous. And that's the legacy that Senna left. He was bolder, braver, fearless on the track. He took risks that like other drivers wouldn't take because of his faith. And that inspired me. And it also bothered me. It inspires me because I want that. I want a faith where I like so believe in God, where I so trust in Jesus and follow Jesus, where I so believe that like this life is temporary and that earth is not my home and that my perspective is so shifted by eternity that my decisions, if viewed from the outside, would be called reckless, crazy, dangerous. I want to be accused of being fearless and dangerous by my enemies because of my faith. I'm inspired by that. That others see my faith as an unfair advantage in this life. I think that's amazing. And I hope you're drawn to this too. I hope that whatever level of faith you think you're at, that you see someone who lives like that and like some part of you wants that. That like a mediocre, half-hearted faith is not something you're wanting to settle for. That you're inspired and drawn to something more. That you want to have a deep and dangerous faith as well. But this story also bothers me because I don't feel like I have quite that. I don't feel like I'm there. And I started to ask myself the question, well, why? Why don't I have a kind of faith like Senna had? Why don't I have a kind of faith that makes me dangerous or gives me like an unfair advantage, like at that level? What is holding me back? Now, what's holding you back from a faith that is deep and rich like that? So I looked at some stories in the Bible, and I think I at least have a reason. I might not have all the reasons, all the things holding you back, but I think we can try to discover the biggest one. So there's a guy in the Bible who has the same kind of faith as Senna, or probably more accurate to say that Senna has the same kind of faith as him. His name is Abraham. And if you've read the Bible hardly at all, you probably know that name. He's a pretty famous biblical character. He's very well known. He's kind of talked about all throughout the Bible. He's held in very high regard. And at one point in the Bible, he gets like the nickname, the Father of Faith. And as nicknames go, that's pretty cool. I have not ever had a nickname that cool in my entire life. The Father of Faith. But Abraham did not start there. Abraham started off as a regular guy. So he didn't grow up in a Christian home, doesn't look like his parents really had any kind of faith. The culture that he grew up in certainly wasn't like a faith culture. So Abraham goes from regular guy to father of faith. And that's the part that's so fascinating to me. It's not just that he ended up there, it's that he started way down here. And it's the beginning of his story that is incredibly powerful, because you have to ask the question, how do you go from regular guy to father of faith? And what's that first step like? And the beginning of his story, if you know it, is absolutely wild. Now, one of the things you should know if you're looking for Abraham in the Bible is that at first he's called Abram, and then God actually eventually switches his name to Abraham, and it's a really big deal. We're not going to go into that. But so when I read these verses, it's actually going to say Abram, but it's the same guy. So the very first place we meet Abraham in the Bible is Genesis chapter 12, starting in verse 1. The Lord said to Abram, "Leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you." Okay, so if you've never read this story before, you might just look at that, but you're like, oh, okay. But this is a crazy thing God just told him to do. God just said, hey, leave everything you've ever known and everyone you've ever known and go in a direction, and he didn't even really tell him the destination. That's what God just told him. That's huge, right? That's a massive thing that God's telling him here. And what I want you to see is that this is actually step one. That this is not like some PhD level thing that God just did, like, hey, I know you have a couple of degrees in faith already, now you're ready for the really advanced thing. It's not that. He's not like on the varsity Christian team. He's not been a grizzled Christian veteran for 30, 40 years, and God's like, now I'm gonna give you the tough one. No, this is out the gate. This is the first thing. This is like show up day one on the job. What's the initiation? Leave everything and everyone you've ever known and go that way. He's rookie here. And this is what God is telling him. That's crazy, right? Maybe it actually started getting me think like maybe we coddle new Christians too much. Maybe we should challenge you a little if you're newer to the faith. Like, hey, maybe we should stop taking it so slow, because God starts real fast here with Abraham. And can you imagine that conversation where God shows up to Abraham and he's like, hey, Abraham, so I want you to leave all this and I want you to go that way. And Abraham's like, oh, okay. Yeah, wow, that's like everything? Yeah, okay. That way? Well, what do you mean? Like, what's that way? Just go, just that direction there. Abraham, they're like, there's nothing, like what's that? What is that way, God? What's out there? I just see like a horizon. And God would be like, well, your destiny, your calling, your purpose, your mission in life. And Abraham would be like, I don't see it. Like, how will I know, you know? And God's like, I'll tell you when you get there. And that's the whole conversation. Now, that's a maddening conversation, especially for some of us in the room. If you are like a type A person, you know, if you are a detail-oriented person, this kind of conversation drives you crazy. Because God gave him a direction, but he didn't give him any details, right? So for you, that would drive you crazy. You'd be like, no, I want the whole plan, God. Every step, A, B, C, with like 1, 2, 3s and the little I, double I, triple I. Like, I need all the details and the sub-details and the sub-details, God. And here's the problem. This is why this is so important for you. This little tiny story is so important for you. Because if you're a detail person, probably what you're doing, God will nudge you to go in a direction and be like, ooh, okay, I think I'm supposed to go that direction. But then what you will do because of the way you're wired is you're like, I'm gonna wait for some more details though. I know it's supposed to be that way, but I wanna know what this is, the next step here, or is it here? I know he wants me to, but I'm gonna wait for God to give me this one. And then I also wanna know this one, and then this step, and then this step. So I'm gonna wait for God to tell me the detail, and you'll sit there. And here's the thing I need you to know. From what I read in the Bible and what I've experienced in my life of faith is that more often than not, God's gonna give you a direction and he's not gonna give you a ton of details. You're actually not gonna get them. And the reason that's so important is because I think if you're waiting, maybe right now, God is nudging you in a direction, kind of pushing you to do something, to take a step of faith in some direction. The mistake you're making is you're waiting and you're not taking it. You want to get the details before you take the step, and I actually think the way God typically works is you take the step and you get the details for the next step. And then you take another step and he gives you the details for that step. He doesn't, I'm sorry, hand you the whole playbook at once and be like, here's what's gonna happen as you take all those steps. He doesn't give you the whole plan. He doesn't give you the details. He gives you direction. So if you're waiting for details, you might miss out. You might miss out. Now, for Abraham, again, I want you to put yourself in his shoes. God shows up, says, hey, leave everything and go that way. This is like a double barrel fear situation here, right? So if you had reason for fear, 1, to leave everything you've ever known, that's scary. 2, to go in a direction, but I'm not gonna tell you really where you're going, that's another fear thing. So he's got 2 different types of fear happening at the same time. Now, God does give some details as to like what's out there, but they're not very helpful if you're like traveling. So here's what God says to him in verse 2. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous. You will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt. All the families on earth will be blessed through you. Now, not helpful when he's like, go west. That doesn't, like, how will I know when I get to this? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not very helpful. But those are some massive promises, aren't they? Like, can you imagine God saying something like that to you? Like, hey, gonna make you into a great nation, gonna make you famous, bless you, bless those who bless you, curse those who hold you in contempt, and all the families of the earth are gonna be blessed through you. Like, those are some crazy big things. That's a lofty calling. That's bigger than Abraham, right? That's way bigger than Abraham could possibly even wrap his mind around. And the reason this story is so important is because I want you to kind of put yourself in this story, and I want you to feel that this is the kind of thing that God does on a small scale with us all the time. These promises that God just made don't feel directly attached to the thing that God is telling him to do. You know, like walk west and I'll tell you when you get there. And by the way, I'm gonna make you into a great nation and all the families of the earth are gonna be blessed through you. Like that is crazy big prophecy, small act of obedience, and God is making this connection. And this is the things God's promising here, they're huge. To make him into a great nation, that means he's gonna have that many like offspring, as generation after generation is gonna turn into nation. That's huge. And then that little line at the end of that prophecy that all the families of the earth are gonna be blessed through him, did you know that's actually a veiled prophecy about Jesus? That through Abraham's line, eventually, Jesus is born. And all that Jesus comes and he dies for the sins of the world, and all the families of the earth are blessed through Jesus. So this is a prophecy about Jesus 1,000 years before Jesus shows up, is included in this promise to Abraham. And all God tells him to do is, hey, leave that and go that direction. And the connection there is so hard to make. And I think you need to see that this is the way God works. that somehow Abraham saying yes to God here in this physical thing, God is attaching that act of obedience to his cosmic plan to save the world. And here's what that felt like for Abraham. He is leaving what he knows, right, to go into the unknown. He's leaving the familiar to go into the unfamiliar. He's leaving the comfortable to go into the uncomfortable. And he doesn't fully understand what he's walking towards, but he definitely sees what he's walking away from, right? And I want you to see this is how following Jesus works, though. In your life, this is how faith works. This is how a relationship with God works. This is how Christian growth works. If you want to grow as a Christian, this is what it's going to feel like. You're going to leave the known into the unknown. You're going to leave the familiar and go into the unfamiliar. You're going to leave the comfortable and go into the uncomfortable. That's how Christian growth is going to work for you. And your life right now, you've got this life, and this would be like your comfort zone. This is the known, right? You've got a lot of ways you do stuff. You got a way you handle relationships, right? You got a way you handle stress. You got a way you handle money. You've got a way you handle your kids and your family and all that. That's the known. That's the comfort zone. And what happens as a Christian is you've got all these ways of doing things in this life that you're living. God will come along and he'll press on a part of it. And you'll know that God's kind of nudging you to change something in your life. And what he's doing is he's getting you right up to the edge of that comfort zone, and he's kind of pushing you out of it. And you have that decision to make right there at the edge of that comfort zone to say, am I gonna willingly take this step? Am I gonna shove God back? Am I gonna try and stay in the known? And it's scary, right? I mean, God could be nudging you all kinds of stuff to get you out of this comfort zone. God might be nudging you to break up with that person because they're no good for you, and you know they're no good for you, and God might be saying break up with them, and you're like right on the edge, and you're like, I don't want to do that, God. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe God's nudging you to finally marry the person. Put the ring on it. Somebody paid me to say that. Put the ring on it. It's Christmas. Go get it done. And I know that because you're like, oh, I'm in the known. I know what this is like. I know what it's like to date. And I know that's a total unknown, and that's scary. It's not comfortable. It's not familiar. Or maybe God's calling you to, hey, you need to start giving money away. You got to stop keeping everything I give you. You need to start being generous in your life and on a regular basis. And you're like right there, and you're like, oh, I don't want to do that. Or maybe for some of you, you've been holding on to a grudge. You're just mad. And it's to the point that you kind of have a love-hate relationship with the grudge because you hate it, but you also won't let go of it. And maybe God's nudging you to forgive and let go of that. And all of these things, and I don't know what your thing is. Maybe it's not one of the ones I listen, but God is nudging you outside of that comfort zone. And it's scary. Because there's a whole lot of what ifs, right? Isn't that what happens? When God nudges you outside of a comfort zone, you start doing all the what ifs, all the what could happen, but what about? And what I want you to see, if we go back to Abraham, is Abraham is in a situation where him leaving does carry a lot of risk, right? His whole life that he's living is the known, and God is calling him to step out of that. And man, that's gonna be not a necessarily easy journey, right? He could get attacked by wild animals. He could get attacked by hostile people. His wife could hate it when they get there. That would suck, right? Like it could be not. He doesn't know where it's going. He doesn't know if there's like streams and stuff to like feed his flocks. Like he doesn't know any of that stuff. This is a huge risk for him to leave what he knows and go into the unknown, to leave the comfortable, familiar, and take a risk of faith following God. And on top of that, the promises that God gives him are not like readily accessible. Do you ever notice that? Like some of the promises God gives us, not like this tomorrow it's gonna happen thing. God promises him that he's gonna make him a great nation. Do you know how many kids Abraham had at that point when God promised that? 0. That's crazy, right? God's like, hey, I'm gonna make it. God didn't even say, hey, big family, like a city size. No, great nation, huge promise. And Abraham's like, I don't even have any kids at all right now. Like that promise is so far out there. And then the Jesus thing, there's no way. Abraham probably didn't even understand the thing that God said, that all the families of the earth are gonna be blessed if you just start to take these steps of obedience. There's no way Abraham could have seen the fullness of what God was calling him to. No way. But you know what he would have seen? What he would have seen is what he was leaving. That would have been 20/20 vision, right? He's leaving the barista that gives him his normal coffee order every day. He's leaving that restaurant that he goes to, the school, like he passes every day on the way to work. Like he's going to leave he's going to see all that. He's also really easily going to see the risk of potential problems and stuff that he's going to face as he goes. He's going to see all that real clear. But the thing he's not going to see clear is what God promised. That's how it feels. That's how it feels. And see, we don't want that. We want the promise to be crystal clear. We want the thing that God's going to do to be very obvious before we take the step. But I just want to tell you, it doesn't seem like that's the way it works. And a lot of times you won't even be able to make the connection between the act of obedience that God is calling you to and the massive thing that God is going to do. You won't see it. And I think in your situations, you're going to crystal clear see what you're leaving. You're going to crystal clear see the danger, but you won't be able, the edges of what God is going to do with your act of obedience, that's going to be fuzzy. You're not going to be able to fully see it. You won't fully understand it because odds are it's bigger than you. It's bigger than you. And that keeps us stuck. And then the other thing that you need to consider about Abraham is that, like, if he was doing the thing that we do, God nudges you to do something and you start doing mental calculus, you know how you do. Like, I feel like God's calling me to do this, but if I do it, it's going to cost this much. It's going to be maybe this much pain and this much frustration and this much mental energy. And you start doing the math. Like, if I stay the same, it'll cost me this much. If I change, it's going to cost me this much. And you start kind of deciding it that way, which, by the way, if God's nudging you to do something, you shouldn't be deciding it that way, but that's what we do, right? Well, if you do the math for Abraham, him leaving, his life gets worse for a while, right? Like leaving everything you ever know. Like this is not going to be better traveling and not knowing where you're going, right? His feet's going to hurt because he's walking all the time. His back's going to hurt because he's carrying all of his possessions. He has to deal with the complaints of his wife and the people he's with and all the servants and stuff. And he's got to deal with the mental energy of keeping everybody safe and deciding what routes to take and what campsites to camp at. He's going to have a huge mental load. And all of that's going to be worse than what his life was. The short term is going to be worse unless he just stays in his comfort zone. That's actually going to be better. And I think a lot of times when we're following Jesus and we're doing that thing where we're making a decision, should we do the thing that God's nudging us to do? We're making that math equation and we're like, that's worse. Doing what God says to do is actually going to be worse for us in the short term. And that keeps you stuck here. Because it is worse. But consider if Abraham had said no because that's worse, the immediate is worse. The moment I step out of this comfort zone, my life gets worse. If he had said, no, God, I'm good, he would have missed out on God's cosmic plan to save the universe. We wouldn't even be talking about him. We wouldn't know who he is. Abraham would be just another guy who lived in the ancient Near East, who had a normal, whatever that was back then, life. And for a while, it would have been better than him obeying. But the fact that he said yes, the fact that he took that step of faith and allowed his life to get a little worse at first, to say yes to God, put him into this plan that God had that wove throughout millennia that now puts Abraham in this hall of faith, precursor to Jesus, part of the genealogy of Jesus. Like that's crazy what he stepped into and what he would have missed out on. So, here you sit. I don't know what your story is, and I don't know what God's calling you into. But I know God is always kind of calling us out of our own story into his story. That's always what it is. It's this invitation to jump into the thing that he's doing. And I know that ultimately it's always better. And it's also terrifying. So what I think is holding you back, what I think is holding me back a lot of times from having a faith like Senna or a faith like Abraham is The life you're used to is the barrier to the life you're called to. The life you're used to is now the barrier to the life you're called to. That safe comfort zone that feels like a warm blanket actually has become a barrier to you living the life that God has called you to live. And I know it's weird because when you think about your comfort zone, you don't see the edges of it, right? These are invisible, kind of fuzzy edges around the comfort zone. But then the moment you take a step out of it, you're like, oh, yep, I'm outside of the comfort zone. I'm gonna step right back in here, right? Like you don't fully know where it is until you step out and then you feel it. So it's weird because it doesn't seem like a barrier. It doesn't seem like something that should stop you, but this has such a gravity to it that is preventing you from taking the steps towards the life that God is calling you to live. And what I want you to see is like this idea, obviously staying in the comfort zone means you're trying to rid your life of discomfort, right? When you step out of it, it's uncomfortable, so you step back into it. And it's like we don't like discomfort. But what happens is when you try to get rid of all the discomfort in your life, you also get rid of all the purpose. And like that's important for you to know because you don't do that on purpose, right? Nobody's here like, I want to get rid of all purpose in my life. I'm done with purpose. It's annoying, right? Nobody's saying that, right? But you are probably saying, I don't like being uncomfortable. I want to get rid of all the discomfort in my life. Unfortunately, discomfort and purpose are usually linked. So when you're sweeping your life to get rid of all the discomfort, you're also sweeping the purpose out with it. And you're going to lose both. So we're in this series right now called Comfort or Joy. And if you weren't here a couple weeks ago, that's actually a play off of a line in a Christmas song, Comfort and Joy. I said or, because I think the idea that we have that comfort and joy are compatible is a little misleading. I don't know that comfort and joy go together quite as good as we think they do. And today what I want you to see is that your comfort zone, that place you live, the known, the familiar, the comfortable, if you stay there long term, if you never leave that comfort zone, I believe that your comfort zone slowly leaks joy. That the levels, and it's almost imperceptible. That's why you don't panic, you don't freak out, because it's just the level's going down so slow year after year after year, the joy's going down, the joy's going down, the joy's going down. You don't notice it. You don't see, it's not like a sudden drop, so you don't do anything. But if you stay inside your comfort zone, the joy level of your life drops. Which is why when God nudges you outside of it, I feel like that's the thing that starts to refill the joy when you say yes to these things. Yes, I'd rather come outside of my comfort zone because I want more access to joy than staying in it. Your comfort zone leaks. I wonder if that's where you're at right now. And now it's because it's so counterintuitive. You don't think about that. Like, no, of course the place I want to be is my comfort zone. This is where I want to live. I love it over here. Why would I leave? Well, you leave because if you don't, your joy level just drops. And it doesn't make sense. But I promise you, if you could find somebody who's in their 70s or 80s and if they would be honest with you and say, yeah, I stayed inside my comfort zone for the past 20, 30 years, I bet you they're not happy. I bet you they're not happy, or not as happy as they could be. So, if you don't step out of your comfort zone, if you don't say yes to God nudging you, I believe you will ultimately have less and less joy in your life. So here's the big question. How did Abraham do it? How did he make that decision? He was in it, the comfort zone, the so dangerous comfort zone. That invisible barrier was there for him. How did he break free? How did he say yes to this wild thing where God's like, leave all of it? Don't just, because for us, let's be honest, most of the time God's calling you out of a piece of your comfort zone. Rarely does he say, leave it all. Just leave everything. That's a pretty rare thing. And for Abraham, he's like, step all the way out of it. And here's my promises. They're way out there. They're fuzzy. You can't really fully understand what I'm going to do, but you should follow it anyways. How did he make that decision? How did he do it? Because it was, from our perspective, incredibly risky, right? He's going to risk this good life, this comfort zone, to step into the unknown here. This is a risk. It's a risk. Even, again, you look at Senna, the way he drove, he took risks. Risk was such a big part of this. They both leaned into risk instead of shying away from it. Risk is an interesting thing. Did you know the Bible doesn't really say anything directly about risk? Like, there's no proverb. Wouldn't it be cool if you ever read the book of Proverbs? Such a good practical wisdom thing. Wouldn't it be cool if in Proverbs there was like a whole chapter on like, here's wise sayings about risk? There is not in there. Jesus didn't like tell a parable where he explicitly talked about risk. There's some verse, you might find the word here and there if you get the right translation, but it's kind of most of the times the word risk is used, it just means danger. It's not the kind of risk that we think about. So the Bible doesn't really talk about risk, but you know what it does talk about a lot? Two things, fear and control. Fear and control are all over the Bible, everywhere. We are told repeatedly in the Bible, do not fear, all over the place. Now, some of you probably are like, yeah, I saw on social media, the Bible says do not fear 365 times, one for every day of the year. It doesn't, that's a lie. Don't get your theology from Facebook, that's the lesson. It's over 100. It's a lot. It's not every day of the year, but it's a lot. The Bible says, do not fear, do not fear, do not fear. That's about as explicit as it can get. If you're like, what should I do with fear? The Bible says not to. A lot. That's the command there if you're looking for one. And then when the Bible talks about control, it repeatedly reminds us that we don't have control. And that's probably the bigger difference between us and Abraham. It seems like the biblical people in the stories understood at a much greater level that they didn't have control than we do. We seem to buy into the belief that we have more control than we really do. And that's probably what makes this dynamic a little bit different, and it makes us maybe difficult to learn from somebody like Abraham, because I don't think Abraham even thought about things in terms of risk. He had a different paradigm, a completely different way of thinking. I don't think he sat down and said, well, if we leave, this is what might happen, and this is the potential good, and this is the potential bad, and how can we mitigate that? He didn't have a word mitigate back then. Like, they didn't do that kind of stuff. That's not the questions he was asking when God nudged him, because risk wasn't on the radar. Abraham knew two things. He wasn't supposed to fear, and he knew he wasn't in control. And I don't know which one you struggle with more. Do not fear, or you're not in control. I wonder if they're not super related, though. Isn't it weird? When I say do not fear and you're not in control, some of you are like, what now? Those don't go together at all, right? Like, if for you, the source of your fear is everything that you don't have control over, right? And for you, what you do have control over, that's where you don't have fear. And this is why you struggle sometimes in your life, is when you feel out of control, your fear goes through the roof, right? So in the Bible, God's just repeatedly reminding you don't have control, you don't have control, you don't have control. Even when you think you do, you probably don't. And maybe this is going to be awful for you today. So the big lesson is that you actually don't have as much control as you think you do. You actually maybe hardly have any. Because can I prove it to you? Right now, any one of us in this room, your phone could buzz and it could change your life right now. It could change your life. You could have your phone buzz and nothing would be the same from that moment on, right? And there's nothing any of us could do about that. At all. I really hope nobody's phone buzzes right now. It's so weird. But we don't have it. We think we have control, but we don't have control. And this control thing that we do, this is part of the comfort zone thing. It's not just familiar. It's not just comfortable. It's not just that it's known. It's that we feel like we can control things inside of it. And when God nudges you, he's actually asking you to unwrap your fingers from around something, and you don't like that. But see, Abraham, I don't think he thought that way. I think the reason Abraham was able to take this step is because he realized that a risk-free life was an illusion. That he knew that it was risky to stay and it was risky to leave, and that there was dangers in staying and there was dangers in leaving, and that the question was not, how do I manage risk? The question that he asked, which is the one we should ask, is who is in control? Who is? If it's not you, Who is it? And if you ask that question instead of all of the risk questions, when you get nudged to do something and God pushes you out of your comfort zone and you have the choice to jump back in or to keep going, the question isn't how risky is this? The question you should ask is, who's in control? Oh, that's so different. Doesn't it feel different? Can you imagine asking that question? God nudges you to do something. All right, who's in control? Well, that's right, the one who's nudging me to do the thing. He's in control. God's in control. Not me. It was an illusion anyways. Even the control that I thought I had inside of that comfort zone, it could be shattered in a moment. It wasn't real anyways. So Abraham doesn't look at it that way. He doesn't look at it like this is the safe place. No, he's like, no, if God's nudging me to do it, God is in control. Let's go. Let's go. That's how he did it. That's how he went from regular guy to father of faith. I think he had to continually ask the question, who's in control? God nudges me, who's in control? God is, let's go. God's nudging me, who's in control? God is, I'm gonna take that step. I'm gonna make that decision. I'm gonna take that risk because God's in control. God's in control, God's in control. That's the resounding, repetitive chorus of his mind. God is in control, not me. So he took the steps and became the father of faith. So here's what I wanna ask you. What's the next thing God wants you to do? The next thing. Just the one next right step. This is important because I know some of you come to church and you're like a hot mess and you're like, well, I have 7, 8 to 35 things that God wants to do in my life, and I'm gonna stop doing these 70, I'm gonna start doing these 100, and God's gonna get, everything today is gonna get fixed, and you're gonna take one step in 800 directions, and you're gonna get overwhelmed, and ultimately next week come back the exact same way, right? And what I'd rather you do is push everything to the side, just give God a completely blank slate and ask God, hey, what's the one next thing you want me to do? What's the one thing? Not the 10, not the 5, not the 3, not the 2, just one. What's the next right step, Lord? Maybe it is go buy that ring. Go get it. Christmas Eve is coming. Get that, practice that speech. Get it done. Maybe it is maybe you do need to start giving money away. Maybe that's the thing that God's nudging you on. Hey, we need to start doing that. I need to start planning for that. But it's risky, yeah, but who's in control? Maybe you do need to forgive that person. And yeah, I know, well, what about this? And what about this? What about this? Who's in control? Maybe you need to sign up for classes. Yeah, but what about if that's what God's nudging you for, who's in control? Like, I don't know what the thing is. It could be big, it could be small. Maybe it's God just nudging you to like read your Bible every day. You know, he's just like, hey, I just want to hear from you. I want to interact with you. And you just need to get on an app and make it a daily thing every day. I don't know what the next thing is for you, but ask him. Ask him, what's the next right step? And then immediately remind yourself, who's in control? Who's in control? Maybe the next step for you is to sign up to get baptized. You've watched us baptize 80 people this year, and you've been sitting there the whole time knowing that that's a step that you should be taking, and you haven't done it. Do it. Right after service, get up and walk back to the welcome desk and sign your name. Start that journey. Maybe your next step is you've not crossed that line of faith. You've not put your faith in Jesus yet. You're on the outside looking in. You're here, you're observing, you're watching, you're curious, but you haven't actually said, you know what? I'm in. You haven't asked Jesus for forgiveness. You haven't given God your life yet. You just kind of stood, it's right on the edge. It's right on the edge of your comfort zone. You're right there. Maybe some people you know are on the other side of it, but you're like, this is the known. I know how to do this. That's scary. That sounds risky. And you need to take that step. And I would encourage you to do it right here, right now. You can stop listening to me and pray a prayer. You can pray a Jesus, I give you my life prayer. You can pray a Jesus, I need your forgiveness prayer. It's a prayer of surrender. And it's a comfort zone shattering prayer to start a relationship with God. And it's the beginning of a whole new life. What is your next right step? And remember, for Abraham, this was the first one. This was his first step. There were a whole bunch of steps after this. He made some messed up ones too. He screwed up. He didn't have a perfect record from regular guy to father of faith. But the direction of his life was I'm going to do what God tells me to do, and I'm just going to keep reminding myself that he's in control. And that's what I want for you. I desperately don't want you to get 20, 30 years down the road from now and be like, all I did was play it safe. All I did was live my life in my comfort zone. All I did was make the safe choice every single time, and you stayed here. And 20 years from now, 30 years from now, your joy level will have dropped. And your purpose level will have dropped. And you will not be the person God has called you to be, and you will not be doing the things that God has called you to do, because it's not going to be inside your comfort zone. And I don't want that for you. And I don't want it for our church. The life you are living now is the barrier to the life you are called to. Pray with me. Lord, I thank you for Abraham and Senna and people who have these inspiring stories of faith. Thank you for showing those things to us, Lord. I pray for every person in this room, every person watching online, that you would inspire them and draw them in with these stories. That we would want a dangerous faith, a faith that's an unfair advantage in life. I pray for the person who like you're nudging them right now, Lord, they know what that next step is and they're afraid to do it. Pray that you would break through on that they would start asking the question, who is in control? I pray for the person who hasn't crossed the line of faith yet. I pray for them right now, Lord, that they would engage with you right now in prayer and ask you for forgiveness and give you their life right now. And that would be the beginning of a relationship with you and the first day of a new life for them. I pray for this church, Lord, that we be a church full of people who say yes to you, who say yes to you, say yes to you, who say yes to you, even when we can't make the connection between what you're promising and what you're asking us to do. That we would trust you and keep saying yes. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.